I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and this rather lush sedan is the Jaguar XF. The Jaguar XF is a British rival to cars like the Audi A6, BMW 5 Series and Mercedes-Benz E-Class, but it's a lot more exclusive here in Australia. That'd be one way to put it. Slow selling would be another, but to combat that, Jaguar have basically now thrown the kitchen sink at the XF. It has a turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, that's the only one that you can get, but in terms of standard equipment, it's a pretty well-stocked vehicle in the sole trim that you can buy here in Australia, which is the R-Dynamic HSE. And in this video, I'll get into what that means, but basically, it's just a high-spec Jaguar XF. And as you can see, the one sitting behind me here in Fuji white is a very attractive looking vehicle. That's one thing that Jaguar's designers do extremely well, is they make their cars very, very desirable to look at. Of course, that is subjective, but I think that's almost elevated into the objective because I don't understand how you could look at that car and see ugly. But anyway, you can let me know if you disagree down below in the comments. Now, the XF does things a little differently to some of its rivals. It does have that kind of British high luxury feel to it, but you pay for it. It's 102 grand before you start optioning it up with a fairly short list of accessories that you can choose for it, and of course adding on-road costs. And in today's video, we're gonna run through exactly what this car does well and what it does badly. We'll start inside, we'll have a look at the back seats and the boot, discuss the running costs, and then get out on the road in this XF P300 R-Dynamic HSE. But before we get started, make sure to hit subscribe down below the video. The cabin of the Jaguar XF has actually changed quite a lot with the most recent update that the brand has given this car. You'll see this slate touchscreen here. I'll come back to that in just a second. The first point I want to make is that for $102,000, which is what this vehicle costs before on-road costs and a short list of options, you're getting a pretty nice XF for the price of a base model BMW 5 Series or Mercedes-Benz E-Class. Those vehicles are giving you their lowest tune 4-cylinder engines. Here in the XF, we've got the higher tune, we've got all-wheel drive, but we've also got a really nice interior with heaps of additional standard kit that you don't get at this kind of level on those German rivals. And that starts with these gorgeous seats, Windsor perforated leather, Jaguar calls these units. Sienna tan is the color of this interior, and as you know, if you're a subscriber, this is exactly how I would have it. We've also got open pore wood trim, we've got a lovely soft perforated steering wheel here. All in all, it feels a lot more special than a BMW 520i, I won't lie to you. But some of the parts of the interior don't come together with quite as much maturity as what you get in a 5 Series. So Pivi Pro, that's the name of this new touchscreen here. We've got this large slate. We've also got digital gauges ahead of us, and it works pretty well. It's got enough processing power behind it. It's actually some of the menu systems which are a little bit less easy to understand than BMW's iDrive. Of course, as an owner, it'll come to you as second nature pretty quickly. And the good news is that the Meridian stereo sounds really fantastic and has these nice grills up here on the doors, which are leather lined, tan stitching. You know, it feels pretty lush, pretty sexy in here, if I'm honest. The touch controls for the climate, yeah, they're okay. Thankfully, the fan control and the temperature is done with rotary dials that are still physical. The gauges themselves are clear and crisp enough. You can put a map in there, which is better than you can do on some rivals to this car. So the execution, all in all, isn't too bad. The seats are also comfortable. They've got lots of adjustment as standard, and the practicality is okay. Big cup holders here, wireless charging, a decent bin between the seats with a couple of USB ports, relatively small bottle holders in the doors. All in all, it feels driver focused, relatively tight in here, not as generous on space as an Audi A6 or a Mercedes E-Class, but if you're looking for that sportier cabin in this segment of car, the XF is probably the way to go. The back of the Jaguar XF does exactly what it needs to do, and that's transport a couple of family members or colleagues in comfort on a longer drive. Most people that are buying a large luxury sedan like this will probably also have an SUV parked in the garage next to it for family duties, so the back seat doesn't have to be that great, but in actual fact in the XF it is decent. You can see for myself at 6 foot, headroom is fine, despite the fact this car is fitted with a sunroof. Legroom's really good, it's just that tow room's a little bit constricted, but I could definitely put up with it for a while. We've got air vents back here. We've got a 12-volt socket, bit old school, no USB ports in the back, but we do have a flip down armrest. with a couple of cup holders here, mat pockets in both seats, and also really soft stitched leather or faux leather, something like that, up here on the doors. All in all, it feels pretty special. And that's before you get to this like mink headliner, which is kind of, I don't know, it feels very like saucy parlor in the 1970s, but it's definitely interesting from a tactile perspective. It's comfortable, the seat base is angled up. You know, it's very much a usable back seat. Next up, boot space. Here around the back of the Jaguar XF, this is still a handsome, stylish, slinky saloon car, in my opinion. It's a fairly unadorned rear end. We've got this nice satinized chrome that runs between the taillights, and this is the P300 all-wheel drive, the sole variant of XF that you can buy in Australia now. Jaguar have whittled the range down from an enormous coterie of variants that included such niche specialty as a twin-turbo diesel V6 station wagon that sadly nobody bought, to just this sedan. But it's still a relatively practical vehicle. Power tailgate opens up to reveal 459 litres of space. The aperture is on the narrow side, but you'll still get quite a few suitcases in there without issue. We've got a hardy boot floor that tilts up to reveal a space saver spare. We've got a couple of hooks, and that's really about it. You won't be finding remote releases for the backrests, but they do flip down. The boot, of course, closes electronically as well, so that we can talk about running costs, our last step before heading out onto the road in the Jag. So what's it going to cost you to run a Jaguar XF P300? Well, first of all, fuel consumption is fairly manageable with the P300 engine. You should expect around 9 or 10 litres per 100 Ks in combined driving, closer to that 7 litre per 100 mark. Out on the highway, that's not too bad. The old diesel models, which are now gone from Australia, were significantly more frugal, however. Servicing, Jaguar offers reasonably priced cap price servicing for this car. It comes to $1,950 for 5 years and 102,000 kilometres for this vehicle, which is cheaper than virtually any rival in the luxury full-size sedan segment here in Australia. And the warranty on the vehicle is 5 years with unlimited kilometres, which is equal to the likes of the Mercedes-Benz E-Class, better than the Audi A6 or the BMW 5 Series. So, what's the XF like out on the road? Well, as you can probably hear, it actually makes a pretty nice sound when you take off, even with this new-ish engine, the 2-litre turbocharged petrol 4, which is part of the Jaguar Land Rover Ingenium family of engines. You used to be able to get the XF with heaps of different engines in Australia. The old gen car had 4 cylinders, V6s and V8s, and the new generation or second generation XF ran with a bunch of 4 cylinders and petrol and diesel V6 engines when it first launched in Australia. But nobody bought it, and as such, JLR have scaled the range right down to just the variant it thinks will please the majority of people, which is the P300 petrol I'm driving here. 2-litre turbo 4, as I mentioned, but it's pretty potent. 221 kilowatts of power and 400 newton meters of torque, so fairly decent actually for a 4-cylinder in this class. More power than you'd get in an Audi A6 45 TFSI, more than a BMW 530i, for example. So it's a punchier, more powerful 4-cylinder than rival 4-cylinder cars. That being said, this is a big Jag and it's not a big engine. We don't have a 6-cylinder or an 8-cylinder option available to us, so I guess it's a good thing that the 4-cylinder ain't bad. I'm not gonna lie to you, when I'm driving a big sultry Jaguar saloon car like this one, I would prefer it to have more cylinders because I'm just a bit traditional like that. But thankfully the execution of the Turbo 4 in this car is good enough that after you've been driving for a few minutes, you pretty much just forget about that stuff as you kind of glide around on this engine's sufficient torque at low RPMs, and the fact they have actually tuned it to make a half decent noise as well, which definitely helps. It doesn't sound like a strained, asthmatic 4-cylinder like the Mercedes E350, for example. This actually makes a much nicer engine sound than that car, and it's also better to drive in virtually every way. And that brings me to the ride and handling, which really is what the Jaguar XF is all about. Apart from the looks outside and this sumptuous English country club interior, you'd buy this car for the way it proceeds down the road and goes around corners, because like the other vehicles that sit on this IQ AL2 platform, so the XE, the Jaguar F-Pace SUV, and also the Range Rover Velar, among other vehicles. There's just this inherent suppleness to the way the Jaguar XF drives that's actually missing in vehicles like the Mercedes-Benz E-Class, and to some extent the BMW 5 Series, and to a lesser extent again the Audi A6. Some of those German rivals feel just too sportily tuned, but they still have kind of a softly sprung suspension, as if they're trying to blend luxury and sport, and failing most of the time, in my opinion. Whereas here in the XF, it has that slinky, sporty Jaguar persona to it, but it actually has this underlying inherent suppleness and really good coordination of the springs, dampers, and wheel control, so it is genuinely a comfortable but sporting vehicle. Similarly, while the XF doesn't have the same level of agility as the XE, it still corners really well. The steering is communicative, it's got really good weighting and damping within the steering rack itself. You know exactly what the front wheels are doing, and it's a pleasure to punt this vehicle with a bit of dynamism. In fact, I think the XF does a really good job of disguising its relatively hefty size and weight a lot of the time, because it just has that pleasant kind of sensation that it shrinks around you in the corners. It is a big luxury saloon car. It doesn't forget about its core mission, but it certainly doesn't feel unwieldy on an Australian back road. And it's actually one of those cars which is a real pleasure to drive every time you get in it, because the control surfaces are weighted really consistently and pleasantly. It sounds good, it's got this comfy seat, nice steering wheel. You know, it's a well thought out product. And the other thing I'll say is that the build quality on this new facelift XF interior is actually really good. Less creaks and rattles than most of this car's German rivals, which I know is not a fashionable thing to say about a Jaguar. And I've certainly doled out my fair share of criticism to Jaguar Land Rover product in years gone by, but this one is executed really well. There's no way to avoid that. Of course, there are some areas that it trails marks that probably have more R&D in stuff like safety tech. The lane keep assist is fairly rudimentary, bounces from side to side, I find, in this car. The adaptive cruise works okay. Blind spot monitoring, that's all good. We've got AEB, so it's fine. You know, it's got enough of that tech. It's just not quite as sophisticated as BMW assisted driving or something like that. But it is very quiet and refined in here. The 20-inch wheels don't really diminish the ride that much. They will clump and thump over constant, complicated bumps, but most of the time you just get this lovely sort of leveled off, supple ride in this car, which is really enjoyable. And I think when you're spending $102,000 on a car before on-road costs, you know, you want it to feel like it was worth $100 grand, and I think this one does. It's a special feeling car. You can tell you're in a luxury car. The only thing I've been missing this week has been heated seats, because it's been pretty cold in Sydney, and that's an option, which this particular test vehicle doesn't have. So there's been a cold butt on a few mornings. First world problem, of course, but again, it does come back to that spending $100,000 point that I was making just before. But all in all though, look, I enjoy driving the Jaguar XF, and it kind of brings me back to that point of a great last internal combustion vehicle. I think we all know that if you buy a Jaguar XF, you're not going to enjoy the same resistance from depreciation as, I don't know, some rivals. Not that any of these large luxury sedans hold their value that well, but if you like the look of this car, and like me, you enjoy the way it drives, then why not, hey? Why not? Oh, last word, the thing I almost forgot about, which I thought was going to be an issue on this test, is that all-wheel drive is standard on the P300 XF in Australia, and there's absolutely no reason why this car needs all-wheel drive in this market, because you're not going to be taking it to the snow, I wouldn't have thought, an XF sedan, but still, it has it. But the good news is that it doesn't actually have any bearing on the car at all, really. It does send some torque to the front wheels, of course, but you can still make this thing power over steer. So it's very much rear biased, so I wouldn't even really take it into account that it's fitted to the car. It's there. You can't get a rear wheel drive version, but it still behaves very much like a rear-wheel drive car. So those are my opinions of the 2021 Jaguar XF P300 all-wheel drive. Look, buying a full-size six-figure Jaguar sedan isn't in the daily habits of the super rational, but neither is buying a large luxury sedan full stop. If you're buying in this category, it's because this is the kind of car that you love, depreciation be damned. And that's fine. The days of these slinky, rear-wheel drive, combustion-powered saloon cars are definitely limited. So if this is the one that you like, then you go out and buy it now, because there's a lot to like about this car. Not just the beautiful design inside and out, but also many of the traits of how it drives too. Just a slightly more compliant and settled suspension would have been on my list. Keen to know your thoughts though? Let me know down below in the comments. While you're there, make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.